All right. Well, it's not going good. It's not really going good at all. So I've got the two videos out. My initial review, and then I had the video about some of the issues I was trying to tackle with the cooling, adding the secondary fan, adding a heat shield to the muffler, took off the back plate to allow the radiator to pull more air in. Oh, and I got the exhaust tip breathing out. So the good news, because I'm searching for some good news right now, the good news is that those things certainly helped. Before, I kind of talked about how when I was operating the machine, it got up to 60 degrees pretty quickly, and then it was starting to crawl, but it really never stopped. And in fact, I ended up getting up to like 67, maybe 68 degrees at one point. But it was doing that in about 10 minutes. What I can tell you is now, after having done these improvements, I'm reluctant to even call them improvements at this point because I still don't have a machine I can use. And it might be a Chinese skid steer, and it might be a low-cost skid steer, but it's new. It's new. It should just work. It could break tomorrow, but it should work at least once. In theory, it hasn't worked once because it would just overheat. So, anyway, back to the story. So the improvements, they have helped. I was able to operate the machine much longer. Actually, I got at least 20 minutes in this time. But it really struggled to get to 65 degrees. It did eventually get to 65 degrees, so that was a problem. But I was able to do a lot more work in the high 50s, in Celsius, by the way. If you're watching this video, then chances are you know these things are in Celsius. But I was able to do a lot of work in the high 50s and kind of low 60s, and then I could actually throttle the machine down. And by the way, that was at full stroke, so letting her eat. And it eventually did get itself up to about 65 degrees. If I could throttle back, I could actually keep working, and the machine would start to cool itself down. Not much, down into the 60s, but before I couldn't even do that. Before, if I throttled down, it didn't matter. This thing was going to stay in the mid 60s, probably even keep going if I let it. So obviously didn't want to do that. So I could put another fan in it, but there's probably just a better solution to try for free. I'll just take the hood off. I don't want to operate it that way because I'm just allowing an opportunity for dirt and mess and everything else to get in there, or something to fall inside. But, there's just really not a lot of room for air to still escape there. Let me just see if I can get you a little closer. So if you look in there, I mean, it's just not a lot of room. I mean, there's only a couple inches. That this cover actually has this depression in here, and some of the other ones seem to be a little taller, which would create more room. Plus those holes could be bigger. So what I'm thinking is take the hood off. The whole thing can breathe. If it keeps overheating, then I'm gonna have to put a second cooler on it, or just a whole new one. Or there was one other thing, and I actually posted this on one of the Facebook messages. I did eventually use my laser thermal temperature tester, and I couldn't get that thing to match what the gauge was saying. So, for example, when I started it up, this is after doing the improvements. When I started it up, it was at 30 degrees, 31 degrees Celsius, which if you convert that to Fahrenheit is 80 something degrees, 85 degrees. But that's crazy to me because the ambient temperature here, it's Central Florida now, okay? So we get it's December, okay? It's our winter. And sorry for all the air quotes. I guess I'm feeling kind of air quotey. But that temperature that day, and I rechecked, I think the high was in the 78 degrees. And so the machine was sitting in my garage all day, and it's not a really well insulated garage, so anyway, I don't think the garage was warmer than it was outside. Okay, the attic maybe, but not down here. Just typically not. So because it's still shade versus the sun, but nonetheless. So that was interesting to me. It actually made me wonder: is the probe bad, or is the gauge incorrect? Is it plus 5%? So when I would take the laser, I'd shoot it all around the machine, on the hoses, on the radiator, on the fittings, the metal fittings. So if that fluid is running around in there, in theory, those metal fittings should be conducting at least a similar heat. But I had a pretty big delta between my gun, my laser gun, and what the temperature, the thermostat was telling me on the gauge. In fact, if somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 degrees or more, 10 degrees Celsius, so whatever that is to Fahrenheit, something greater than that. In fact, the closest I got the temperature gun to read to what that gauge said was when I put it directly on the pump. I actually put the laser right on the pump itself. And at that time in the video, sorry I don't have that video, but on that video, I was getting 51 degrees at the gauge, and the closest I could get it with my laser gun is 45 degrees, and that was directly on the pump. Now, keep in mind that pump down there is only about 6 or 7 inches below the muffler, and obviously it's mechanical, so it itself is generating part of the heat, and then the outer casting being 6-7 inches away from that muffler was with the heat wrap on, so that helps a little bit. Nonetheless, I guess where I'm going with that is the probe is in the cooler. I would think that the cooler, in an effort to cool the fluid, would give off a lower temperature than the pump would. Now, my thermal gun was giving me a lower temperature at the cooler and the fittings on the cooler than the pump, but not the probe. So all this is a long explanation to say that thing may be broken. I hope it's broken. So I'm thinking that the next free test to do, take the hood off and operate it. If that solves my problem, even broken or not, if I can get that thing to regulate itself within a safe range of temperature, then what I'll probably end up doing is just cutting a bigger hole in this hood and, I don't know, put some hardware cloth on it or something like that and call it a day and just be done with it. And if I've got a little bit of cushion there in the thermostat itself because it's adding 5 degrees or something like that, then so be it. At least I would be on the safe side. So okay, so I'll show you what I got going on here. Haven't quite made it to tightening up any bolts, but one of the issues I've been working on is that this configuration was too wide, so I was lucky just to get these bent enough that once they're in, you can see they'll bring the handles a lot closer. But this was before I even bent it. It's hard to tell, but the handle was rubbing on this. So when they set this whole plate just needs to shift over. So my options are that I Dremel out every single one of these places it's bolted, or I just kind of create some relief right here. And to be honest with you, for what this thing is, we're going the path of least resistance, which is one and done. So I'll go ahead and start cutting a little relief in here. I'm not going to do it with a Dremel. I'm just going to do it with my grinding wheel. you can see you've got them a lot closer. So I should be able to work this much easier with one hand. And then this is what I was creating some relief. So that, you can see, hits a little, but before it was just actually creating some friction with how tight it was. But you can see the little banana in it now. Ooh. Ooh, that's loose. Oh, well, I kind of want it to be like that, though. Okay, so what I'm tightening... Sorry, microphone. So I've got the lid on top of the hydraulic tank. Lid being not one that you screw with your hand, but it's just a metal plate where I think at some point it would probably be smart for me to pull that. Maybe when I do the fluid exchange, I'll pull that lid off and actually put a cap, like a screw cap on it, because right now this is just a bolt in, which I'm assuming is fine, but these bolts are loose. So the bolts are actually not loose. I found a rubber O-ring underneath the lid, and the tightening that I was experiencing was actually that O-ring crushing. Stay tuned, you'll see that in a minute. This could be where my hydraulic leak is coming from. Now I could tighten these down, and we all know if it's not machined very well, it's not going to seal. But they're pretty loose, so even if I can reduce the amount of hydraulic fluid that's leaking, then I've probably identified where it's coming from, and then I can take the next step, like an O-ring or some type of gasket sealer. I just noticed something. There looks like a piece of O-ring that's squeezing out of the back of that plate. So I think it'd probably be best if I just take the whole darn lid off and see if that's what it is. Obviously, that's not going to work. There was an O-ring.
Look out for the Chargers, dude. Look out for the Chargers. Talk about getting a hiring, right? And we've chatted about this a little bit. For a while, it was, we need the new offense move. We need the offense move.
It just looks too big. Yeah, I think that's the problem.
Are we getting back to a time?
I don't know if you can see that.
We need somebody to lead.
But the O-ring's just too big.
I think so.
So see, this is such crap. But you can see here where they've just wiggled it around the bolts. But one side was pinched and squirting out of the side like that. Hopefully you can see that. It just needs a smaller O-ring.
If I was to go back, like what I know now, compared to what I thought I knew,
I'm reluctant to put a gasket maker on it just because
for this job. But the one thing we all
I'll have a mess to clean up when I open it back up.
And so what you're talking about.
So this is probably one of those times where
like the energy that he brings.
I should probably just slow down and do this right and
and everybody in that building, and then the guy that
go up to Kubota or
this is a guy I want to follow.
Local tractor place and get a replacement O-ring, something that would fit. So, all right. Well, I think that's what I'll do with this one.
Nah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
You want to say hi?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. Got my main man Noah here helping out again. Just a quick recap. So we did go ahead and we got the controls adjusted up top. Went ahead and tightened a few bolts. I did decide just to go ahead and put some RTV sealant around that cap. It'll work, it'll seal, and I don't want to fool around with an O-ring. I was looking at the gap between the bolt holes and the inner diameter of the ring, and I just felt like it may be tough to find that. And to be honest with you, I'm just fighting with my own desire to get this thing working. So, and then the last thing that we did is I'm going to go ahead and run it this next time around with the cover off, and I promise I got footage of this thing coming. I promise. It's in no way am I trying to get it perfect for you guys. I mean, I'm telling you, it's not doing well. I'm fighting my own schedule, being a dad, being a husband, being a provider, the job that pays money, and then, of course, playing around with the toys. So we got that coming. Again, thanks for tuning in. You know the drill. Like and subscribe. It'll help me out, and I can do more cool videos like this. And you got anything else you want to say?
Thank you for the videos and give a thumbs up and bye.
Bye. See ya.
See ya.
I just thought about something else I want to check. 42 degrees Celsius, so I think we might have this thing, guys. I think it was the hood this whole time. Maybe I didn't even need that second fan. I'm certainly not going to take it out at this point, but ooh, a little backfire. Okay, so right now it's at 42 degrees Celsius, so it's I would say, I'd say it's regulating itself. It's actually cooling itself. So I think maybe this whole time it was the hood. You know, maybe it's one of those things in hindsight that I shouldn't have fooled with the muffler jacket and the exhaust tip. That was the right thing to do. It needs the carbon buildup just needs to be exiting the side here. But maybe I didn't have to do the secondary fan either. So whatever, not gonna take it out now. They're certainly not gonna hurt. I mean, I do want to run this with a hood. So whatever I come back with, I'll just cut a bigger opening and I'll probably put some expanded steel